For a very brief time, I gave talks at the Whitney. And I remember giving a talk in the permanent collection, and then I suddenly moved the little audience, maybe 10 people, around the corner, and there was Roscoe listening in.
Oh, really?
We knew each other. He was very embarrassed to be caught, eavesdropping on my talk.
Okay. Joining us today, artist, UFO expert, rencontre, Renaissance man, Budd Hopkins. Budd, welcome.
Thank you. I don't know about all of those adjectives, but nouns.
After having read your new book, Art, Life, and UFOs, I think you easily qualify for all of the above. I have to tell you, Budd, I came into your world via Intruders and witnessed in your UFO books as a young guy. And reading this book, I ripped through it because I was really fascinated about the art world that you played in, you've succeeded in, you've lectured about, you've taught about. How did you get your start as an artist? Tell us, because those folks who may not want to read your book, share a little of your backstory.
I don't think there are very few that won't want to read the book.
Oh, good.
Just in case. The thing is, essentially, I think the way it started for me, I think in retrospect, was that when I was a tiny kid I had polio, and I was laid up, and my leg was in a brace and I couldn't walk. And so I really had to do everything here. Unlike other kids, I wasn't running around and so forth. And I think that it was just a habit that started early of making my own world about as far as from my shoulder to my hand. And naturally, my parents encouraged me because, they had no option. But so as time went on, and I got more and more involved, and it just became a major preoccupation. But the interesting thing is, I never understood anything about art, capital A. In other words, I never heard, until I went to college, it's hard to believe now, I never heard the name, say, Van Gogh or Picasso or Cézanne or something like that. Because all I did was draw. I made copies of warplanes during World War II.
Right.
And Time magazine would come out with, Churchill or Rommel or whatever on the cover. And I would copy all these things and send it to my father, who was in the Army.
Right.
And they had something called V-mail, so I had these little V-mail things to send. He threw them all away, but unfortunately. But the thing is that it was just, I was always making art. And when I discovered capital A art at Oberlin, that I wrote about in the book, I was astonished. I thought, this is fantastic.
Right.
And that this is really a kind of way of life that's valuable. And at that point, I was stuck.
But you grew up in West Virginia. I grew up in Ohio. That was the Rust Belt.
It sure was.
You got a job in the coal industry, in the tire industry, steel mills.
Yeah.
The world of art you dabbled in. That wasn't a perceived occupation for
it wasn't.
A young gal or man who
Not
was
at all.
coming of age.
I think that the rest of the family kind of, no doubt, they were very shocked when it became a career for me.
So you go to Oberlin, you start to expand your universe. And I read in the book, you take a trip with your family to Europe. And they're off doing the tourist thing, and you're just absorbed in the great museums of the world. That was like the second blossom, I guess, opening up on your art flower.
Well, first of all, Oberlin has a very good art museum.
Right.
And as we speak, sitting here, there are something like 20 major paintings from Oberlin at the Metropolitan Museum because they're renovating or something like that. At any rate, so I had a museum to go to, and then I went to the Cleveland Museum.
Right.
And so I'm sort of expanding like this and finally going to Europe, and it's whammo.
Right.
And at that point, I had gotten really involved with Mondrian as the modern painter who still has a tremendous influence on me.
Right.
And I was extremely involved with Vermeer, partly because there was a kind of connection between Vermeer's orderliness and Mondrian. And I fell in love with Caravaggio, and I started going to every museum I could find a Mondrian or a Caravaggio or a Vermeer. And, you know, I was just absolutely dazzled. And the terrible thing was, I'd get together with the family for dinner, and I'd be bursting to say, Jesus, I saw this Vermeer, you can't, and they're saying, you know, pass the whatever.
Yeah, we were at the Eiffel Tower.
And we did a nice, we did some shopping. And,
You always had a work ethic. So even though you were an artist, you got a job at the museum.
Yeah.
You know, handing out tickets. You have some great anecdotal stories. The Eleanor Roosevelt story. You care sharing? That's a fun story.
Well, the amazing thing about that was, I'm selling tickets. We had one booth. Tickets were 60 cents, and I was the fastest one at the chain, so they always stuck me in the booth. That was my job for $45 a week. And I'm standing there, and the line is going through, and suddenly there's Eleanor Roosevelt standing there in front of me. You know, she's about 9 feet tall,
right.
It seemed. And she had her 60 cents. And I said, Mrs. Roosevelt, no, this is on. I gave her the money.
This is on the taxpayer.
Yeah. And I said, this is on me. I took her around, and she looked very kind of embarrassed, you know.
Really?
And I said, this is my honor. And she said, oh, well, thank you so much. It's like she didn't handle compliments well.
Right.
You know.
Now, you know, you said, I thought that this is very interesting, that, you know, we take for granted, you know, your 15 minutes of fame today. Everyone wants
Yeah.
it. You know, everyone has got this, you know, zeitgeist that they can grab on Facebook and all these social media sites. But
I
back
just
then,
had 6.5 minutes.
You had 6.5? Well, you still have a lot of life left. You have some time.
Yeah.
But you said that in the art world, Salvador Dali was like
Oh, yeah.
the pop icon.
Oh, yeah.
And he knew how to work the whole thing like Warhol worked it
Yeah.
after him, and then
Yeah, exactly.
Madonna after Warhol.
When he came to New York, Dali was the only nationally famous artist, period. I mean, people had heard Picasso or something,
Right.
but Dali was in all the gossip columns and everything, the mustache.
Experimental movies.
I was walking on Fifth Avenue once, and there he was, you know, and so naturally, you do a double take. You know,
Right.
and everybody was, because they all knew Dali. I mean, this wasn't just,
Right.
it was every truck driver, you know. So I look at him, and he realizes he's got a hot one, me.
Yeah.
And I look at him, so he looks like that at me, you know. And so we walk down the street, and he looks around like that, and I look at him, and people are beginning to understand he's doing a number.
Right.
And we start to cross the street together, Fifth Avenue. And I let him go ahead, and so he's about 10 feet ahead of me, and he looks around like that, and I look at him, and people were laughing. You know? And we get to the other side of the street, and off he goes. He's had his little thing, his
Right,
little
right.
bite of fame, you know, with some poor slob me, you know. But the point was, everybody knew him because he did all sorts of stuff. He did movies, he did, and I think when Warhol came along, he understood that you couldn't just paint. You know, you had to do a lot of other things. So he wrote books. You know, he
created a whole scene.
Oh yeah, he created a scene. He made movies. The whole thing was, in other words, the whole thing was much bigger. Even instead of the mustache, he had the hair.
The wig.
So he had a way in which he could be identified. And so right away he became, well, much more famous, say, than de Kooning or somebody like that.
Oh, absolutely.